Hello, everyone. I'm gonna tell you about collective experience for relationship development, specifically how to scaffold conversations with large language models and how they could generate prompts for self disclosure. Okay, so the main inspiration is such a complicated process of socialization and talking with each other that is usually got many problems, including conversation not being open, one-sided, not that engaged. Both participants, users, could be in the talking with each other, as well as the low level of self-disclosure that leads to usually a poor experience with talking with somebody. Uh, if you never talk with anybody online, that's gonna I'm gonna show you an example of a typical conversation. So, two users, one kind of want to talk with another, and bam, nobody like. There's no way to continue this conversation. So here, yeah, it stopped. It was going for some time. It sucks. Yeah. Why the other person did not ask any additional question? They might be disengaged. They might be tired. They might not have time right now, or maybe they have to do this all around many times. Think Tinder. Like people had to talk with each other for many times with a different each others. However, uh, let's say that yeah, that's a quote of one of the participants saying that, hey, sometimes in a conversation, it's not clear where to direct it from that point. So, what if we had a wonderful tool that could help us by showing us, hey, ask about your favorite research experiments, research experience. And what if you could have not only not two but three options? Let's make you see it. Uh, how to continue that particular conversation, and you had a choice to select what you want to talk about. But if you want to talk with a specific person, if you don't, it's this tool is not for you. So that's exactly what I've kind of done. Those are the real examples of a system's suggested prompts for conversation development, and the only input it received from that specific user is the same input that I showed to you a few slides ago. Okay, so the main contribution of this research is creating a new platform, also like kind of two platforms, but let's say 1.5 platforms that was tested for user experience and usability with a classical lab test, including DTR students and just some lost souls during DTR Studio Open House, and field test with 4 or 5 users from crowdsourcing platforms. So they're like all around the world. And the main idea is large language models are good enough in supporting chat, and they help users to continue in the conversation that they were going, but provide them necessary scaffolding. Uh, the main design argument is large language model generated conceptual prompts help contextual sorry prompts help to go deeper in conversation, and generated means that it's not predefined, it's not something predefined. Whenever a user needs some scaffolding with a conversation, they could receive that scaffolding. Contextual mean that that's not something random, not something unnecessary, unintentional, but something that fits well for that specific user, for that specific conversation, and help to go deeper. They are based on existing scholarship about self disclosure, so they actually supposed to help people to develop what they're talking about with each other. As an interface model, my second interface model is this kind of a chat with the prompt, but also there was a first interface model that was kind of a bot. This bot that was inserted in conversation between two people, and that was an ideal model, but for testing it's not that useful. So second interface model. There's existing conversation going on. There is generated prompt that you could use and take from here and actually insert in conversation so that, hey, I don't know what to talk about with each other next. That's what we're going to talk about with each other. Looks simple. The whole system model is there is a chat, there is users, there is a chat environment when the conversation is happening. Ideally, it would not be a dedicated app, but it will be an app where users are already talking with each other and then comfortably, it's comfortable for them to talk with each other. There is uh, the decision layer that decides whether the users actually need this prompt. It's not yet implemented, but an ideal system it will be. What exists right now, there is GPT-4 model that on demand, basically when the user presses a button, generates a prompt that is being sent back to user, and user receive a message with a prompt. Also, there is a database structure, but it's only for logs and it's mostly research based one, so that I be able to analyze the conversations. Okay, yeah. So uh, the large language model kind of received really simple extraction that it's super good for helping with self-disclosure and relationship development, that it's supposed to provide relevant prompts, and it also received a list of really good prompts that were scientifically validated in existing research. This paper. Example of how it works. This is a message. This is a reply from a system. Hey, the initial message mentioned computer science and cognitive science, high left, if you're watching it, and the system suggests that's what you could talk about, that's what could you ask this specific person. And not only one possible options, but several. Yeah, because it's good to have an option. Maybe system is not that good, so let's give some amount of control back to users. Let's put humans back in the loop. Uh, what I've done to justify what I've done. The first kind of zero previous prerequisite user study was about just replying to some message with a message contained different level of self-disclosure, and it was interesting to me whether user could recognize messages with self-disclosure and whether self-disclosure actually provokes self-disclosure, whether it's like level of reciprocity in that. Uh, and I asked a set of questions. What was hard about answering to this message? This was a random message about, hey, I want to move to a new country. I'm a little bit stressed about it. Could you give me an advice? And what was easy about answering this message? Hopefully, if a person, me, self-disclosed enough in this message, it's really easier for you to self-disclose as in a response. Both conditions, that's the first text, that's the second text. The second text included some level of self-disclosure. I mentioned that I'm nervous. I mentioned that I got a cat and her name is Catty. Uh, and I asked slightly more specific question and wanted to see whether users could capture it. Users are crowdsourced workers. They received it as a task. I paid them for replying. They're from different countries, different ages, different genders, and the result is that people are replying to me. Sometimes they replies to general and without any specific details. Sometimes it's was one time it was in different language. I translated it for you, but yep, yep. For the results, there is too much of internal variation within each subject, so doing between subject design was a mistake. Uh, so I had to move on. The first actual study was one way where I built an actual system. It was a chatbot that was integrated in Discord. I asked few people to talk with each other or with me, and we used it to generate prompts. And then I asked several silly questions to people about their experience chatting with me and using those prompts. And overall results. Uh, Okay, good results. Prompts are overall useful. Users were somewhat happy with them, but prompts kind of directed the conversation. So they nudged people to talk about what they were talking. Here you see Kapil asking for a prompt being generated. It's about favorite way you spend the weekend, and there is no conversation happening with the users based on this prompt, but two people are replying to the same prompt, and only after they kind of reply to the system, they could talk with each other. Therefore, it's kind of switching focus from interpersonal communication to communication between people and let's say chatbot, and then back to personal. What is not what I initially intended, but I had to move on from this given circumstances. Moving on, second study, to protect and be somewhat more responsible with my studies, I could not use the chatbot with crowdsourced workers because chatbot was integrated in Discord and kind of people had to use their own IDs. It's not a good thing. It's unethical, or I have to provide them with IDs. And there is a problem with that because Discord was confused by this new IP addresses, two-factor authentication. Everything went straight to hell. So I had to build this chat. It is simple. There is text input, there is previous conversation, and there are prompts. Uh, and also integrated a silly Likert scale about, hey, was it hard talking to strangers? And I asked almost the same question. Yeah, the experimental one. Uh, okay, in control, people just had to talk with each other, and I kind of forced them to think how complicated is it talking with strangers. And the second part, experimental condition, people had to talk with each other again, but this time they had this button that was able to generate these prompts, and I simply asked them, "Hey, do you think these prompts made the conversation better or worse?" And then I asked each of them a follow-up question with the idea to understand the mechanisms. Uh, what I mean by mechanisms, how the prompts actually helping users to go deeper in the conversation, continue the conversation, or just keep the conversation going. As the participants, uh, again, I recruited 5 crowdsource workers. I paid them uh, $5 for less than 30 minutes conversation, which is not that okay, I guess. We were talking about living wage in US, but they were paid at least something, and they're not from US. It's a different economy, which is above what they usually could get at this platform. And this conversation was somewhat funnier than the usual jokes they have to do, so I'm somewhat okay with me doing not such a good thing. And also had to discharge students whom I have not paid. Results super promising. 100% of users said that prompts made the conversation better, but again, I only had 7 users. Uh, so the quantitative results are not that good. Let's switch to qualitative and look at some quotes from participants. Basically, the idea of a mechanism was that prompts kind of took this cognitive load from people, and they don't have to think about what will be the next topic, what the next thing they need to talk about with each other. Again, those are complete strangers. They didn't know each other, and since people could rely on this system, they were somewhat more happy to talk with each other. It's we as people like answering questions. It's not that easy to ask questions. And yeah, there is a discussion that large language model generated contextual prompts are helpful for conversation development, but with some limitation. Again, I mentioned that for only short conversations, less than half an hour, they were between complete strangers, so it will actually it might be different between people who talk with each other a lot, between people on a different stage of the relationship, and users had really limited control over the prompts. Uh, they could press a button and they'll get a prompt. They had no idea what kind of prompt they'll get, which is kind of a bummer. So let's go to the future work. Again, the same problems that I stated. Firstly, there's a the next obvious step will be to do longitudinal test with actual friends. Ideally, somebody who always talk with each other using Discord, or it's not that hard to integrate the same chatbot in whatever platform they're using for conversation. So that's an obvious next step. And the last one is to give users some steering wheel over prompts. I tried to implement it earlier in this presentation so that participants could actually see the prompt before they're sending it into the actual chat, but I have not tested that yet. Also, it might be a good option to generate a set of prompts that kind of happened during one of the user testing, but unfortunately, the user just was, oh, I accidentally pressed the button several times. I will just select the last prompt out of the list, and they did not really pay attention to all of them. Maybe I need to redesign the study a little bit to see whether having choice actually helps people, or maybe people don't like choice that much. The takeaways: computer scaffolded conversation actually working, which is good. Yeah, uh, it's not that terrible level of invasion in people's world, and they're actually helping to some specific users in some specific experimental limited scenario. Uh, there is a clear way on how to improve the current system. Again, uh, continuous conversation, different stage of development, integration in existing platforms so that people don't have to use my sketchy platform that I built in a few days. And the last one, it's important to acknowledge that there is supposed to be somewhat a level of integrity in what the hell I'm doing, because initial idea of this project was to completely replace people or like to generate short long replies to conversation. But if we would do that, that will be just a conversation between two bots, and we lose the human part of human computer interaction, which is a bummer. Okay, that's the whole project for you. Thank you for listening. Feel free to ask me questions if you could find me.